Okay, cool. So can everyone see this okay? Yep. And just a heads up, Glenn, as you joined after I said this is being recorded, just as you've got your video on, I want to give you the heads up for privacy. But yeah, cool. So the kind of, not so much the agenda, but in this live stream, I'll be going through reactivity in Webflow. And we'll be starting from the clonable that I launched yesterday, day before, this week, and kind of breaking it down. If you've got any questions, just raise your hand or use the chat. And if we've got time, or if you want to, we can also look into like populating dropdowns from Airtable data, or even sending the form data to Airtable. So like I say, I don't kind of mind what we show. Oh, Dante's just joining as well, so I'll let him come in here. And I feel like I'm missing a Zoom panel or something. How do you open the... There we go, now I've got the chat. So welcome, Dante. We're just getting started. So here we've got the clonable. If you want to clone it and follow along, I will copy the link and add it in the chat. And let me dive into, actually, I will clone it so we don't make any changes to the live one. Okay. So first, what I'll do is I'll touch on reactivity, just a kind of a quick 101 for those who may not be familiar. Like I said, I've got the chat open, so ask any questions if you have any. So reactivity is so powerful in web development because it saves you having to, for example, when you're, if we use this as an example, as I explain it here, let's just publish this. Effectively allows you to combine your data, so your variables within JavaScript, with what's displayed on the screen. So if we publish this and open it, if we take a look here, we can see it says hello unknown. And you may, for example, when the user makes a change to this input field, you may want to update this variable here. Similarly, if you've got a dropdown, you may want to dynamically add dropdown elements. And this can all be done using vanilla JavaScript. You could get the element by the ID and then update the text property, and that's absolutely fine. The issue comes when you're kind of displaying things or manipulating the variable in different places. So say, for example, we were displaying this somewhere else on the page. When this text input changes, so if I put test in here, we would have to get the element, this element, and get the other element and update it in both places. Additionally, what if we wanted to programmatically update the variable? So not when the input changes, but when something else happens. So when a button's clicked, in that instance, we'd need to get this element, update the text content. We'd also need to get the input element to update the value, and then any other instances where it's used. This is a really simple example with this button and input here. And we've got a new JavaScript library that allows you to inspect the reactive store. And this was like a performance thing, because I don't want to get into it too much, but we use proxies and weak maps in the library to make it performant and allow the browser to do garbage collection. I won't get into that too much. So when you're doing console logs, or if you've got the console open, Chrome stops garbage collecting. So this little extension allows you to see it, view it, and like watch live changes as you're typing without having to worry about the console. It's really for no coders. Like that's the whole point of all of this. So any questions before I kind of carry on? Pete, yes.
Not
Yeah.
yet, Joel. I'm sure they'll come.
Awesome, Glenn. Yeah, so in the comments, Pete's put, well, I was not expecting to be able to clone and have the exact functionality. that's one of the kind of unique aspects. Where it's a library, you don't have to sign up or have any configuration. You just have like embeds. So if we take a look here, if we go down, you'll have a embed for each component. And here you can define the store. So we'll move on to this now. This is a good little transition. Thank you, Pete. So I'll open the documentation as well. Like this. And so fetch docs. So now we've kind of done a quick 101 of reactivity. I'll walk through how you install, whoops, that's the wrong library. It's this one. How you add the library, and then we'll run through this clonables configuration. So if you go to the installation, here you'll see the JavaScript library, and you can copy this, and then you'll want to add it in the head of the website. So you can see that here. And you do not want to defer this script because there's a reason it runs before the elements are rendered on the page. Yeah, there's a reason behind that. So, and it's a small library. I think it's just gone over 10 KB, unfortunately, but it's still tiny. And then if you want to add the inspector, you can add this script. We recommend removing it after you've handed your project over to your client, just because this is a much larger script, and it's mainly for debugging and testing purposes. So once you've got those two scripts added, next you want to create your component. And I just kind of want to mention what a component here because there's lots of different variations. Like in Webflow, when we refer to a component, it could be as granular as this select element, or it could be this section here, like a label with a couple of radio buttons. When it comes to framework, we define components as like interactive elements within the page. So you don't want to go too granular because you end up making your life a bit harder interacting between components because you have to use the API. Whereas in this instance, well, in this example, the whole thing is a component. But say, for example, you had a form and then there was a basket at the top of the page. The basket could be one component, the form could be another component, and you can make the two interact. So you can like update variables in one and update variables in another. The reason we have components rather than one app is really to modularize the code and kind of break it down. So you can then take that form component, use it in another project, take the basket, use it in another, and mix and match things. So I'll run through creating a component because I kind of deviate a bit. So this is a simple example. You have your store, and this is what becomes your reactive store. So you're effectively initializing it here, setting the defaults. So we've got fields, and we recommend using fields when you've got a form, because then when you submit the form to an API, you can just send this whole object. You don't have to like get the fields and separate them from things like display success or other state variables inside of the reactive object. So we've got fields, these will be our form fields, and then we've got some other variables, and in this example, it's using these to determine whether to show or hide the Webflow success and error states, like the divs that pop up. Because again, we override the form because the default Webflow functionality hides the form and shows the success on when it's submitted. Whereas in real life, when you're building a web app, that's not really useful because a user's profile form, for example, you don't want it to disappear because they may have made a typo or they may want to change something. So once you've defined your state, you call $app.createComponent. You pass it a component name, and we recommend using snake case, so all lowercase separated by underscores. This can be anything. You can't have the same name multiple times in the page. So if you've got a similar component, you can increment it or have like, I don't know, modal 1, modal 2, etc. Then you pass in the component store, which is this variable here. And then you call mount, passing in the element. So if I load up this example, and if we expand this so we can see the navigator. Yeah, let me know if I need to zoom or anything. But if we take a look here, we've got demo component. And here I've got the ID demo component. So we're going to be mounting this component to this element. So it only affects this element on the page. And one thing that's really special about So Framework is we don't re-render the whole component. And this is one of the key reasons we set out to build a framework specifically for Webflow. Like Vue and Petite Vue, they'll re-render, so then you lose like the interactivity in some of the IX2 animations, and you have to call restart Webflow. It becomes a real headache. So we don't like overwrite it on mount. We just manipulate things as and when. So here we've got the ID. If we go down to the embed, this is quite a big example, but this is, let me turn Grammarly off. This is our store. So it's called demo component store. In here, we've got our fields, which are correspond to each of the inputs in our form. So we've got the company name, the date, and you can initialize them with JavaScript. So here we're setting it to the current date. We've got the industry, got the category, the tags, which is an array, and this will store a list of objects, the company size, and the terms. Next, we've got the categories, and these are just hard-coded for, like Pete mentioned, so you can just clone it and it works. But you could, for example, fetch a list of Airtable records, update the categories, and that will just re-render everything and update the page. But for now, we've got our categories, and to add some context, that is what is shown here. So we've got none, 1, 2, 3. If I check 1, you can see here, text category 1, value C1. And again, if we go in, you can see that's this one. So we store a list of the options outside of our fields. And then when you select it, it updates the value in the field. And then the same for tags, and then our display success and display error, which you'll probably have every time you use a form. And then here, we're doing what I just showed you in the documentation. So app.create component, we're calling it demo_component, passing our store, and then mounting it to the element which I showed. So that's kind of everything you need to know about creating the component. Any questions before I move on to like binding the inputs?
So Joel, is that the script that's at the bottom of the form,
Yep.
which opened up there? That's the like the sidebar, is it?
So
that's the script that pertains to the sidebar.
So the script for the sidebar, let me explain this. Yes, it's a good point. Great question. So this is the library that makes the sidebar appear on your page.
Right, yeah.
But you're correct. The sidebar uses your reactive store. So that's the data you're seeing. You're correct. So this, if we look here, we've got fields, company name, categories, and tags. If I go over to here and collapse it all for you, it's the exact same. We're not getting it from the embed, but we like initialize it, and this is like a mirror image of the store at the live time. So as I showed here, it'd be good if I could zoom. Maybe I'll do that for next time. If I do Joel, you can see it's not static, so it is updating as I'm making changes. And you can add new values, but let's not get into that. But yeah, you're right. So that embed drives it. And I'll point out as well why the embed is here. So let me collapse this down. So I've put the embed as the last item inside of our component element. You don't need to do this. We just do it for, allows you to consolidate your UI with your logic. So then you can just copy this and move it somewhere else. You could put this in the body tag of the page, so over here, but then it gets a bit complicated as you have more components. The reason we recommend it to be here is if you're using symbols, you'll know that you can't have dynamic JavaScript in a symbol. So you can't, like, this component name here, or mounting it, say for example to an element, the ID, you couldn't change the ID of the element within the symbol. So what you can actually do is more complex, but if you could remove this, and that will auto mount to the parent element. We do touch on this in the documentation. I don't want to get into it too much now. If we go to mounting a component here, you can see, oh sorry, you do call mount, my mistake, but you don't pass a value. So it would be something like this. And what that lets you do is, if no element is provided, the component will be mounted to the script element's parent element. This can be useful if you would like to encapsulate your code embeds within your UI elements. It's kind of more for symbols, but if you ever need to do that, reach out. I can have like a demo with you. It's quite, we haven't had anyone want to do it, but we wanted to support it.
So Joel, when you say symbols, you're talking about Webflow's components, as they're now called.
Sorry, yes, thank you. Yeah, components. Oh,
just to confuse.
Yeah, sorry. It's like make an integromat, isn't it? Everyone still refers to it as integromat. Yeah, it strains the human brain. But so yeah, that's does that kind of answer your question, Pete? Brilliant. Next, I'll go on to like how you link that reactive data to the elements on the page, because that's the bit like people want to know. So let's start with the simple one. So we've got a form input. So this is just a normal Webflow text element. If we go to the settings and scroll down to here, can you see this okay? Is it teeny tiny? Oh, okay, I'm getting nods, good. So it's all attributes driven, directives technically, but it's no code, so we say attributes. And you can see the attributes here in the documentation. So if we take a look at X model, this creates a two-way binding on a form input element. So what that means is here we've got X model. So we're saying we want to two-way bind this. And then we want to bind it to fields dot component underscore name. Now, as we're inside of our component, we don't have to reference the component by name. It's scoped. It knows what its scope is. So fields dot company name. And again, if we open up the inspector, you can see fields company name. So it's a good way to see like, oh, I want to map it to this one. So that's that one. And then as I showed, when you type, it updates. Similarly, let's get into some fun here. If we let's put this at the bottom, can I zoom this? Always. Okay. So if you wanted to update this value outside of your component, say you're using, I don't know, like Dante, for example, who's here, he's using Wizzed as well. So he's using a combination of So framework with Wizzed, and sometimes he wants to trigger an update outside of the component. So if we do $app, whoops, this is globally available, so you can get it anywhere, dot components, then your current component, or the one you want, sorry, demo component, then the store, and then let's say fields, and then company name. Let's scroll up so you can see it. So we've got Joel here, and here. So if I say equals Pete, we can see the input updated, the value here updated, and obviously the store updated. So you can update things outside of it. And we may come back to the console later to play around. But that's an input field. Next, we'll come back to the date one because that's using an external library, but we'll come back to that. Next, we've got the native select. So this isn't anything fancy. This is the normal Webflow HTML like select. And here, someone got a question? No, sorry, it might have just been a mic. It could have been, I get interference as well with this thing, a bit of static sometimes. So here I've defined the, oh, sorry, I can see in the chat, yes, that's awesome. Also keen to use this with Wizd. Yeah, so Dante's doing some really cool things when it comes to like rendering really complex lists with like images in them and then nested data. And he wants to manipulate that list and other things on the page to all change at once. So that's his use case. Yeah, might do a video with Dante once he's finished, if he's okay with that, to show it maybe another stream. So in this example, we've just defined the select choices normal in Webflow, because sometimes people want to do that. So these are just static. We've got the text and we've got the value, which is I1, 2, and 3. We look at the attributes, just like the input field, it's got X model, and we're binding it to fields.industry. Now, if we move on, this is where things get a bit more exciting. Static selects, they're useful, but most of the people who I deal with who are using Alphi want to populate dropdowns from Airtable, Xano, like custom APIs, all sorts of places. So here, let's go to this element. Yeah, here. So if we show this, this is a normal Webflow dropdown. And inside of here, we have like our options container. And then in here, we've got so form dropdown option radio. Quite a long class name, that, isn't it? And then in here, you've got, this is normal radio, but it is, the style is set to custom. And that was really important for me. People needed to be able to use custom radio buttons and checkboxes. So if we take a look at this one, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. So we're not using the choice value that Webflow provides, because we want a dynamic value. We want the value to be the ones we're defining in our categories object here. So imagine this could be like Airtable data. It could be the name of the row and the ID of the row. So when you're pushing data back into Airtable, you automatically get those reference fields like auto linked. Nothing, no craziness in between. So for this example, the text is C1, the value is, sorry, the text is category 1, the value is C1, category 2, C2, etc. So the value, we're using xbind value, which lets us override the value of the element. We're setting it to option.value. Now, let me take a step back here, because you probably don't know what option is here. So we've only got, let's take a rewind. So inside of our dropdown, we've only got one option, but yet on the site, we've got 4. So the way we're dynamically rendering these is using an attribute called x4. And this basically allows you to display the element with this attribute for each object inside of the array. So over here inside of our categories, we've got 4 items. And effectively, we're repeating this element 4 times. And then within this element, we are setting the text of the label to be option.text. And option is an alias for the current item being iterated. And it can be anything you want. So it comes from here. So I call all of them in all of our clonables option, just so then people don't have to change all of the references. But this could be category, so category in categories. And then when you're doing the reference here, it would be category.text. In this instance, it's option.text. So let's go back to the radio button. Xbind value, option.value. So the value of this radio button will now be the value inside of the data we're giving it. Xbind checked. So Webflow is being funny there. Why is it not letting me? There we go. Xbind checked is going to set the checked state of this radio button if the fields.category.value, so the one that's currently selected, because this is the single select, so there'll only ever be one. So we've got fields.category.value if it equals the option value. So whenever, if we add new categories or delete categories or push them into our categories array, this, due to reactivity, this will rerun every time. So then this will always be the correct state, whether it's checked or isn't checked. And then finally, X on change. So when we make a change, so when you click an item, or yeah, when it changes, we set the fields.category, whoopsie-daisy, to be the option. And in this example, it's the whole object. But if you just wanted it to be the value, you could do dot value. I mean, you'd have to make some other changes because this whole clonable is built for the objects, but it's flexible. So yeah, that was a lot to digest. So is there any questions surrounding that before we go on to the tags input?
Yeah, just quickly. So basically, if that data, let's say it is Airtable categories or Xano categories or something like that, as soon as they manage to update in that array, within the context here, everything will just update automatically. That's the whole point, isn't it? So the drop down, the choices, everything.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's where the kind of power comes from. It was easier to build Safe Framework than to teach everyone, all of our users, if you kind of know what I mean, like and for them to then maintain it. That's the big thing. We want people to maintain what they're building after and enjoy it. Like the majority of our users don't have a developer background, and like there's people in here, like see Dante there, they're loving developing now. Like it's kind of been that unlock. Yes, so Dante is saying he's happy to show his in a video at some point. Excellent, that's great. Omkar's saying you'll get there, Omkar. It's fine. This is like the selects are complex. Like if you're just, for example, building smaller apps, you won't really have to worry about those. Again, the forms are the most complex example. If you're just fetching data and rendering it in lists, you only really need X4, X text, and like binding it to images and things like that. That's what I was going to do. So let's take a look at the playground on the right, kind of touch into what you were saying, Glenn. So here this is where you can just play and explore. So here we've got a button that's got an attribute X-on::click, and it's calling add category $store. So the functions become reactive as well, kind of linking to what you say, Glenn. So this add category, well, let's maybe hold off on that a second. But so we've got add category $store. So if we take a look at this embed, this is just that function. They're underneath each other, so it's easy to like digest. So we've got function add category. It takes a store. So a $store is like a magic ref. So that will give the function access to the store for the current component, like the component that you're inside of, that you have scope to. So we could do anything here. We could, like, here we're doing store.categories.push, and we're pushing a new category. But at the same time, we could update the name. But let's keep it as it is, because I'll probably break something if I have to type. So if we click this button, so we can see we've got 1, 2, 3. If I click this, it updated here. If we open the drop down, we've now got the 4th one. If we click this option, it's going to check that option. So going back to your Airtable example, or Xano, whichever backend it may be, you could have, let's move away from checkboxes, a list of jobs, and then you could have a form, and then when the user completes the form, they save it, it goes off to the back end, you get a response back, and you could push that response into the array and it will automatically update the list of jobs on the page with literally just a push. You're just pushing the object in, and as long as you kind of, if the keys of the objects are the same, then you don't even have to like do any mapping or any changes. And then finally, we've got the tags. Now, looking at the time, would you rather I did an example fetching some data from Airtable and displaying it in that dropdown? Yeah.
I'm happy to, if you don't want to do it live, I can show mine too, which is live, Joel. It's up to you.
Yeah, sure, go for it. Let me, oh, here, this is a challenge for me, isn't it? Got to do something in Zoom. Okay, so if I stop sharing. One participant, say everyone can. I trust everyone in there. I've got all your Twitters.
Looks like I can share now, Joel.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is hey everybody. I really wanted to join because I'm super thankful for what Joel has made. Because if you all have been developing in Wiz or Webflow or Xano, you know when you're trying to render a large list of items, you have a whole host of issues that you run into. And so here's an example where as a part of the profile, I'll just refresh my screen here. This is a platform for athletes where they can kind of manage a public profile and they can update things like, you know, the schools that they're interested in attending. And so one of the issues that I had was, how do I render a list? There's 800 schools here. So when you try to use CMS filter or CMS load or attributes, you hit issues. When you try to combine that with Wiz, you hit issues. And so I had to build a reactive component that allows me to, here's an example where when I open this, I fetch a full list of 828 schools. As I search, we're going to render just a smaller list of schools. And then when I select these schools, I'm able to, again, add or remove these items dynamically. And I can even do things like, you know, this object clear all, right? Here's a function here where I can just clear that full list. And again, if I reset my search, the search will reset here. And so there's a lot of things that you're able to do like live to make this, you know, possible here. And again, it's all based upon what Joel was going through there. Let me actually get to that template. It's all based on what Joel was displaying there. I actually went to this. Webflow is a little bit tricky sometimes when you're navigating. Here, you know, I just have this component mounted. If you open this up, it's just kind of like what Joel was talking about here. I've got this kind of nested at the bottom of this accordion, this HTML. And if you were to go through that code, again, I'm doing things like I'm fetching the colleges. And so that's going to go fetch the college. And then as I add a college, it's going to push it to a list called selected. If I remove a college, if I click this button, it's going to remove it from that list called selected. If I clear, right, if I click this button, I'm going to set the selected to empty, right? So there's all sorts of things that you can do. I'm getting the count of the schools, right? So that's the one where I'm checking the length, where I'm showing you in here, like, hey, 2 schools selected. So it's really powerful, like what you can do as you start to combine those different elements together. But that's an example of being able to live, you know, add and select and dynamically change features. And this also has xfetch on it as well. So it will actually, you know, I'm showing this adding as it's doing it. And then once they're fully added, you know, the page will refresh automatically. And again, those schools will be added to the end of that list that I just showed you there. So really powerful, but that's a live example for how you could do that.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Dante.
Yeah, thanks, Dante. So there's no collection on that page, right? It's coming from an external data source.
It's coming from a Xano data source, right? There's no collection at all. And so I'm with xfetch, that'll be another video on the page load. Like I can put it on the body and say, hey, go fetch this list of schools, and then store them in an empty array called colleges.
Right.
And so if you have the data available in the colleges, like the image, the name, all of the other things that you want to display, you could then, do xtext, college.school name, xbind source, college.image. And then that's how you can render that list of items in that array that you fetch from any place that you want to.
Amazing. Amazing.
Cool, Dante. Thank you. And just seeing the performance of it as well, that was just rapid, wasn't it? You couldn't see any discernible delay, really.
No. And there's a couple things there where I'm actually fighting with Wiz on some other things. Like it's actually even a little bit quicker than, it can be quicker, right? I'm trying to just disable like some other things from loading, or, cloaks from in Wiz from loading when the page loads, but it's incredibly fast. It's much faster than kind of any other no code solution that I've used. It's almost rapid.
Have you enabled the Redis caching in Xano as well, out of curiosity?
I have not done that yet.
Okay. If you've got that kind of account that allows that, that should actually then make it even faster, theoretically, right, Joel? I'm assuming.
Yeah. So same with Alphi as well. If you enable the cache, the Redis cache gets enabled, and then you can speed up the requests. I think you're still building at the moment, aren't you, Dante? So it adds a bit of a headache if you enable it while you're developing, but afterwards, 100%. And I noticed, because we had a call last week, I think, Dante, there's been an update. So when you're updating your arrays now, when you're removing an element, you don't have to do the filter, which overwrites everything. So we can actually speed it up even more. You can just splice it. So we can do that on our next call.
Gotcha. Just splice the item from the array that you want to take.
Yes. Yeah. That's
cool.
all tested and happy with that now. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. It's more than I could have built in this time by far. Is there any questions anyone's got, or because we've got like 15 minutes left, we could, is there anything anyone wants to see? We could maybe do a simple example of what Dante showed there, maybe just populating a dropdown, but not so people can see the steps. I didn't expect to be 15 minutes from the end and I've shown something as cool as that.
I do have a quick question. Hopefully it's a quick question. And I remember you mentioning this in middling days. So part of this product that I'm working on at the moment, there's a big search strategy associated with it, right? And another part of the problem is the scale, and we need pages to be indexed. So if we're talking like 2,000 pages, if it's all kind of coming dynamically in to the browser when it's needed, then there's nothing to index, right?
Yes. Like at the moment, search engines, I think Glenn mentioned this in a thing to me. I think that they are doing some changes. Excuse me. We do have a solution though. So I'll share, let me open this up first.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you saying there was, certainly with Alfie, there's a solution. But maybe I'm digressing away from.
No, it's fine. I can't remember the URL. What is it? SSR. No code SSR.com. Oh my goodness, what did I call it? Yes. Okay. Let me share my screen again. So yeah, we're kind of shifting a bit away from framework, but this is like really like it's a good kind of transition because people need to be aware that when you're rendering on the front end, that data isn't going to be indexed by search engines at the moment. So it's mainly, like most of our users, like Dante, it's users searching for things, or it's behind their account login, and things like that. Now, instances where you may want it to be indexable are like this example where we've got a blog. Can I, if I go to Webflow?
Just want to say that I actually did find it by Googling it, by the way, the no code SSR blog.
Oh, did you? Oh, I need to start doing that. Oh, wow, that's a good thing. Yeah, I have noticed that we are getting some SEO like traction. It's not something I'm good at all. Okay, let's see, we can use the search here. So there we go, this one. And then if I also, oh no, did I log out? Man, oh, we can actually do it just on here, I think. In the blueprints, I think I've got the example here. Yeah, fetch a list of blog posts. Oh no, that's fetching them. This one. Okay, so you're right. When it comes to having data from an external source that you want to display in Webflow and also have it indexed, you will need to use something called server-side rendering. Webflow don't give us access to their backend, so it's not natively supported. This solution uses Alphi, which is our no-code backend, previously MiddleLink, and Cloudflare. So what's happening is when this page is loaded, we are making an API call to fetch the blog posts, and then we're rendering this using like so framework. This is an older clonable, so I need to update it, but the same concept. So we're displaying them normally because this page doesn't need to be indexed. Like in this example, it's showing you both sides. If we click on a blog, you'll see the URL is not using a query parameter. This is a real URL. So we've got the site /blog / the blog name. All of this data is coming from base row. If you're not familiar with base row, it's the no-code backend I recommend if you're just looking, the no-code database I recommend if you're just looking for a database. It's open source, a lot more scalable than Airtable, higher limits. It's just great. If you're looking for an all-in-one solution, then point people towards Xano. But if you're like looking for a more modular stack, like open source database, middleware like Alphi, Webflow, then base row is a great example. So if I open up the base row, don't know if I'm going to log in. Yeah, I'm not on my profile. I don't want to get all my passwords out right now. But let's carry on. So if we go to this page, if I open it up in Webflow, what we're doing here is we're using attributes again, but we're using our server-side rendering attributes. So for example, this image, if we take a look, we've got SSR-ATTR:/src. And just like in So framework, where we were like mapping the data, instead of a reactive store, this is all done server-side. So we've got data.featuredImage. There are multiple, so we're just getting the first one and then the URL. Next, we've got category. So again, kind of like So framework, it's SSR-text. Then we're binding this to data.category.value. The tags, we also support for, so you can do a for loop server-side. So this will output all of the tags in data.tags. And then in here, just like in So framework, we can reference the one being iterated. So SSR text tag.value. And then finally, we've got the content, which is post SSR text data.post_content. Now, I just want to point out that SSR text will update the text content. So this will not set the HTML value of the element. You can do that, but that can be dangerous if for example, if users can submit posts from your front end, and then you're just rendering those, injecting the HTML, you're going to get an XSS attack. Someone's going to take over your site, and if you've got logins, you're not going to have a nice weekend. So I'll run through kind of briefly how this is a clonable blueprint, clonable blueprint. So if you've got an Alphi account, once you're logged in on the left side, you'll see templates and you can just clone this. So it's a HTTP request. It's not a WebSocket or anything fancy. So GET request has to be a GET if you're doing SSR because you're getting the web page. We pass in a slug. Now, this is a query parameter. So you'll pass the slug as a query parameter. We've got SSR mode enabled. And what this means is if any error happens in your Alphi flow, if you've got authentication enabled, we'll redirect them to the login page. If if an authentication error happens, if another error happens in your flow, say for example, I don't know, you're doing a check on the user's plan or I don't know, something, then we'll redirect them to your error page because you don't want to be, you can't, this isn't like the front end where you can display alerts and pop-ups. This is SSR, so you want to redirect. Next, we make a HTTP request to our Webflow page. So if we take a look here, this page, if I open it, the URL is nocode-ssr.webflow.io/templates/blog post. And this should look not working, don't worry. And that's what we're fetching. So we're using Alphi to not fetch an API, we're using it to fetch the Webflow page. We don't worry about headers, parameters, cookies, caching. Well, we have the caching enabled actually, but that's that. Next, we have a logic check. So we're checking, was that request successful? Like, did that template exist? If it doesn't, we throw an error. As we're in SSR mode, it would redirect them to your 404 or whichever page you set. If it does exist and the request was successful and we have the template, we now make an API call to base row. In Alphi, you can securely store and encrypt all your API keys. So here I'm referencing the API key. I'm referencing or setting the ID of the table in base row. And then I'm using the filters. This looks strange because I'm not logged in. This is a clonable, so that's why you're seeing field underscore. In your account, it would say humanly readable text. I can't expose my API keys just for a clonable. So here we've got the field. So we're checking if the slug equals the parameter passed in. Next, we're doing, so that would return an array of records, but only one because the slugs will be unique. Next, we've got a logic check. So we're checking, was this request successful? And you can use expressions in Alphi if you're familiar with like Python. We're checking, is the length of the data returned greater than 0? So does this slug exist in base row? If it doesn't, we error, and then the redirect happens. If it does exist, we set dataset is like a handy way you can build a new object in Alphi. So as I said, that returns an array. We know there's an item in it. So let's just create a new data set with that item. So then we don't have to handle arrays. Like it's just an object. It's just a dictionary, whatever you want to call it. And then we use a fancy node called render. The render takes two things. It takes a template, which is what we fetched way at the beginning of the Alphi call, and the data, which is that set data set. So it's not a list, it's just the object. And then this render node joins the two using the attributes I showed you, returns a HTML response. So what that means is you now have an Alphi endpoint that will be like our server-side ones are, I can't remember now, SSR hyphen something slash API slash v1 slash the ID. Then what you do, once you've got that, inside of Cloudflare, you configure a route that basically routes the request and passes the value in the URL to Alphi, renders the page, returns it back, and then you've got a beautiful like SEO indexable page with a unique URL. We'll have a full tutorial on this. We do have a blog post. Part 2 hasn't come out yet. Let me just see if I can, if I log in. I probably shouldn't have done it on a guest Google account, should I? Because you can't. I thought I'd logged into Alphi. Let me just get this up really quickly. just to show you.
You're only sharing a window, right? You're not sharing like your whole desktop.
You can only see a window, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I thought I was just going to say I've got my passwords up. Right. So if I, oh no, better enter an email. Joel at middlelink.io. Okay. So if we log into Alphi, yeah, this is the right account. If we go to this SSR demo render blog page one, this is that exact same flow I just showed you, because it's literally the same one. If I copy the URL, whilst I'm here, let's do this properly. Is everyone okay on time? If you've got to dip, that's obviously fine. But I'll try and just wrap this up here.
I'm happy to stay for as long as it takes, Joel, because this is exactly what I was talking to somebody about this morning. Brand new project, trying to render blog post pages, server-side rendering, using Xano as the backend store, no collections and Webflow. This is exactly what we're dealing with. So you're probably going to get a new customer soon.
Awesome. That's perfect timing. It's crazy how these things happen. But yeah, that's great. I'm happy to carry on like for good while longer. Let me log in here. Hopefully you won't see my password. Phew. Okay. So it's going to take me a second here. Yes, this one. I should have just gone with my gut. So here's our table, I think. Yes. Yes. Okay. So this is the table for those blog posts. So we've got the title, the category, the tags, featured image, the content, and this isn't HTML. Like if you're I'm not an expert at all, to be honest, in Xano, but we've got users who use it, so I do have a bit of exposure. But I'm guessing you could probably, like I said, if you wanted to have like complex data like HTML, then I'm guessing you can store that in Xano and maybe like a rich text or some form of field. This demo,
I do that on my project, just so you know, Joel. I store that as HTML, but just as plain text.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm actually using Wizd at the minute to update the HTML on the front end, so it's a bit dangerous, as you say, but I'm the only one that has control over all of the content at the moment. I would love to find a way of sanitizing or doing something with the HTML, whether it's in Xano or somehow else, but we'll have that conversation offline.
Yeah, we had a solution in MiddleLink and no one used it, so we put it off putting it. But there's Mozilla have a library called Purge. I can't remember. I can find out. That's on our roadmap to have a new node, and it will sanitize. Obviously, you kind of got to take it as a pinch of salt, but it's by Mozilla, so let's hope it's good. They build browsers. We've got the post content, the SEO meta description. So this is the bit I think you'll like. The excerpt, I can never say that word. The status. So if you wanted to like show and hide, I think we just show all of them. The authors, approved, date, and then this is where we've got like the slug. So we've got a slug here. Just going to open the chat as well in case anyone is dropping off. I want to be polite and say bye. I can't see. Yeah. Oh, Omkarte's got to go. Sorry, Omkar, if you've already gone. Bye. So yeah, we've got the slug, and then the URL, which is a function, which we build the slug, and then last published, retime. Okay, so you know the data, you're familiar with that. I know you're like an expert in Xano, so I won't teach you how to do your database. Next, if we are logged into Alphi, brilliant. So we've got our flow. I've run through the flow, so I'm not going to repeat that. Let's show you what you get afterwards. If I copy this endpoint, open a new tab and paste it, if I do $slug equals, go back to the base row, and grab my slug for this post, you'll see we've got the page. So this is because we had that SSR mode flag enabled, and Let me close this one now. At the bottom, we're not returning a JSON response, we're returning a HTML response. So this is kind of the part Alfie does in the SSR rendering. And then Cloudflare, I'm not going to be able to log into my Cloudflare account either. I can send you the snippets. Alex Iglesias has got a brilliant tutorial on setting up Cloudflare, and it's basically a reverse proxy you'll need, because you'll then set the reverse proxy up to sit in between your domain and Webflow, and then when the request comes in, you'll take like /blog/the slug, make an API call to Alfie, passing it just like this as a URL query parameter, and then Alfie will return the HTML and render it on the page. So from the user's perspective, they don't even know Alfie exists. They don't even see this URL. Cloudflare does the magic in between. And we do, I believe, do we, don't we? Where is it? In docs.alfie.dev. And one of the Alfie power users, I really hope I can do a demo of what he's built with SSR. He's got these crazy categories, like categories and categories and categories and categories. These URLs are, I logged in, and when I looked at the flow, I was like, this is crazier than any flow I've built in Alfie. So it's like, it's incredible what he's done. And as you're using Xano, you could just use us for the rendering part. You may even, to be honest, you might even be able to do that in Xano. It won't be as no codey as just that one block, but I'm sure, I think, is it Prakash? I think he did a video with somebody on parsing sprintf. That rings a bell. The sprintf function. So yeah, if you need to use it, use it. But I'm always open. Like, I'm always honest if they're using a tool that already supports it. I'm not gonna like trick you. If we go down, do I have the attributes here? Render. So here, these are the attributes. There's hardly any, but it's generally what our users wanted. So xtext to update the text, SSR4 for a loop, SSR-ATTR:/src to update the image, and then you can also set the links. I believe SSR HTML is there as well. We just don't document it. We wait for people to say, is it possible, before we potentially let them make their site vulnerable.
Putting my hand up.
Yeah, if you got any questions, anyone? We have kind of jumped around a bit here.
Yeah, just like to bring this back to shiny objects. So to answer my question, yes, it can be achieved. You can have indexable pages that serve dynamic content from external data sources. But that's not a shiny object thing. That's potentially an Alfie Cloudflare combo.
Yes, yeah, 100%. You can mix the two. So you could have SSR attributes as well as So framework ones. There are a couple of edge cases, but yeah, it wouldn't be using So framework to solve it.
But I think there's plenty of other. There's loads. I mean, it's all the UI, especially the stuff that doesn't have to be indexed. It's just that there is a significant part of the product which we do need to be indexed. But there's plenty of other bits where just having like dynamic content that can be updated in an instant from Airtable is going to be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, and the Airtable side now, like, if anyone who's followed me knows, like, security and privacy are huge for me, and they've deprecated the old API keys. So now we have the proper OAuth flow. I don't think you'll see it if I do my screen, but if you go to here, add connection, select Airtable, like, you get the proper flow. You can give permissions to your bases, like which ones we can access, like users were asking for that. And then if I do a quick demo here, just to show you, say Airtable, let's say we want to list records. Let's see, do I have a key here? This one might be working. Yeah, so let's say event contacts management. I want to fetch the events, configure these, configure the filters, etc. Save it. Let's add a logic node, check. Let's run it first. can take a look at the output. And this is just a test base, so there's hardly anything in it. We've got 2 events. We've got our fields. The next, let's update our logic node to check if this request was successful. So we'll check if the status code. So I'm running through this because I know you were using middle link and things have changed drastically since then. So I won't worry about errors for this example. So now we've got our data. Let's flatten it. So we're going to take where it returns it like this, where we've got ID, created time, and fields. You'll probably want access to the ID and the fields, and these fields would be a pain to handle on the front end with spaces and capitalization. It just wouldn't be easily manageable. So we'll flatten it. So if I run it again, now we've got the same data, but ID, created time, and the fields are prefixed with fields underscore underscore. That's just to stop collisions. We know there's no collision because we don't have any fields called ID or created time. So let's get rid of those fields. So we can do rename keys, add a rule. We want to remove the fields prefix. So we can do fields underscore underscore star. We don't want to replace it with anything. So we'll save it, run it. Now if we look, we're almost there. We've got everything at the same level, no prefixes, but now we've just got these human labels, columns. I'm losing my words here. Let's say we just want to format them, and then let's just return a JSON response. Now when we run it, we have our data, and then you'll be able to use So framework, display it on the page, and do what you want. We even, just kind of digressing a little bit, but because I know you used middle link a while ago, if we take a look now, there's lots of new options like hashing, HMACs, encoding JWTs. You can build your own authentication systems, parsing HTML, so you can actually get a HTML template and extract H1s, H2s, selectors, whatever you want. Ethereum, this one isn't, that's only on my account. MemberStat, you know all of those ones. Postmark, send emails now. So yeah, if you want to have a call later, well, I think we've got one scheduled anyway, Pete, but yeah, does that kind of answer your question? Yep, thumbs up.
Yeah, amazing. That was really, really useful. Thanks, Joel.
Cool. Now I have no idea. I can't see who's in here and who's not in here. I can see there's 4 participants. How do I? Ah, I should have opened this one from the beginning. There we go. Cool. So do you have any more questions, Glenn? Anything you'd like to see, or?
No, that's all making sense. I think I need to get up to speed with Alfie. And I think the only question I've got is if it's my account as an agency, and I'm doing a project for a client, how would I handle that with them? Would they need to have an account and hand stuff over to them, or can I just isolate them within the account? See what I mean?
So the way it works is, as you know, you're a big fan of Outsetter, so we use Outsetter as well. So if you go to the account, what you can do is you could set it up for them, and then go to team members, invite yourself as a team member, send me an email, and then, create the account as you, add them as a team member, send me an email, I'll make them the primary one, and then I can click a button when their trial is over for them to enter their card details. They'll get an email. You don't have to worry like about them registering or things like that. And then you'll still have access to log in and do things. So it's basically each account is a project. That makes sense. Although we are exploring maybe multiple projects in one, but for now, yes, you can have yourself on it, have them on it. They'll pay the bill instead of you paying the bill, or you can pay it if you want and invoice to whatever fits your workflow best.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just having seen what I've seen today, we could possibly swap out Xano for Alfie plus Space Throw, because it wasn't necessarily the API elements that we'd want from Xano anyway. It was really just the data store and a couple of other things. So yeah, it's a really interesting take. I'm glad I've seen this because it's given us an alternative way of going about things, and it solves the SSR issue at the same time. So yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming along. It's been a while since we spoke, and yeah, it's been great to have you here, ask some great questions. You as well, Pete. Yeah, thank you, everyone, and Dante. This is going to be recorded, so I'll try and do it today, but I don't know how long it will take. Upload it, and if there's anyone that you think will benefit from it, if you share it with them, I'd hugely appreciate it. But yeah, I'll close it off now if there's no more questions. Feel free to reach out on Twitter DM or emails.
Yeah, my question is more the nested X4, but that may just be more of a support thing.
Oh, I don't mind staying on. You can go if anyone else doesn't want to see this part, but yes, the nested loops, if you want to like display one list and then in that list have other lists, is that what you're referring to, Dante?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to run through an example because it'll only take like 5 minutes.
I'll leave you guys to that. That's probably a later thing for me, but thanks again.
Wonderful. Take care, Glenn.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dante.
All right. See ya. Nice to meet you, Glenn.
You too.
See you, Glenn.